strong enough for this, is it? Nope. There we go. Got the right button here. When I was driving the moving van for the conference, they asked us to collect a semi-load of stuff to take to different hurricanes. The first one we went to took a semi-load down to the Ozarks Academy and put it in a warehouse in town. And all it was just heaps of stuff, no organization at all. Then Andrew came along, and I took a 48-foot trailer, and I had specific things I was supposed to load on the Upper Columbia Conference to take it down, almost to New Orleans, and took it into an old abandoned Safeway store. And they had everything organized, where things were to go, and where and who was going to get it. And for years, we used to haul our advert boxes down to Watsonville, California, and you could watch as the disasters came more and more. The organization got better and better, and to where I really was impressed to see what was going on here. Looks like they pretty well know what to do and how to do it, which is always a blessing, isn't it? Doesn't that help us in everything? If we know what we're doing and how to do it, we tend to get more done, don't we? Well, thank you for coming this beautiful day. We got a couple of visitors. I don't think, what's your name?
Andrew Nancy.
Andrew?
Yes.
Okay, and
I'm a local now, so I'm great. My wife's a little
okay, all right.
And if they didn't name that storm after me, I just want to make
Okay, well, and I have a similar. I was unloading in Georgia one time when Hurricane Denny came through. So let's have a word of prayer before we get started. Wonderful, loving Father, as we looked at this mission spotlight, we are very, very thankful that we are here in this land, still having the freedom to worship you, and we're not at our front door. But we also know that we come before you needing your Holy Spirit to guide us and lead us, direct us, correct us, and empower us so that we might know you, the only true God, and Jesus whom you've sent. And we thank you for hearing our prayer in his holy name. Amen. Well, I think it's interesting how this works out. This week and next week have the same key text for us to study. The emphasis is a little different. So because next week's lesson is going to deal with the armor itself, I'm not going to deal with that. We'll let Marita do that when she teaches the lesson next week. But we have the helps that come with the quarterly helps. And they had a couple of quotes in the Tuesday's lesson that I wanted to share in case you didn't have that lesson, the helps for your quarterly. I'm going to give it more in context so we have it the complete context, but listen to what this is saying. It's taken from Faith to Live By, page 318. Now, I'm sure most of us have read it in times past, but sometimes we forget what we've read, at least if you're like me. It says, I was shown Satan as he once was, a happy, exalted angel. Then I was shown him as he now is. He still bears a kingly form. His features are still noble, for he is a fallen angel. But the expression of his countenance is full of anxiety, care, unhappiness, malice, hate, mischief, deceit, and every evil. The brow, which was once so noble, I particularly noticed. His forehead commenced from his eyes to recede. I saw that he had so long bent himself to evil that every good quality was debased, and every evil trait was developed. His eyes were cunning, sly, and showed great penetration. His frame was large, but the flesh hung loosely about his hands and face. As I beheld him, his chin was resting upon his left hand. He appeared to be in deep thought. A smile was upon his countenance, which made me tremble It was so full of evil and satanic slyness. This smile is the one he wears just before he makes sure of his victim. And as he fastens the victim in his snare, this smile grows horrible. The people of God must be prepared to withstand the wily foe. It is this resistance that Satan dreads. And then this sentence is the one that was in the quarterly helps really strong. He, that is Satan, knows better than we do the limit of his power and how easily he can be overcome if we resist and face him, end the quote. Have you found him to be easily to overcome? I thought that was an amazing statement. Go ahead, Mel. That's in the quarterly helps, that second quarterly that comes with the quotes from Mrs. White that you can, it's an extra charge. But it's really full of wonderful things. Oh, Faith to Live By. Yeah. That's what you want. Okay, page 318. What text in the Bible coincides with what I just read? Can you think of it? Somebody turn to James chapter 4, verse 7. James chapter 4, verse 7, and see if this doesn't make sense a little more now after we've read this statement from Faith to Live By. James 4, verse 7. Who has it? Go ahead, Andrew.
Submit yourselves, therefore, to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. I'm going to read one more verse.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Draw nigh to God, and he will draw nigh to you. Cleanse your hands, ye sinners, and purify your hearts, ye double-minded. Can I just say that, this is what I call a sandwich verse, because, the middle part says resist the devil, but on the outside it tells you how to do it. That's submitting yourselves to God and drawing near to God. If we don't do that, we can't resist.
Right. But I like that word flee. How many of you have ever had to flee from something? Did you do it nonchalantly? I was fighting a forest fire one time when I was in the Forest Service back when they used to do that. And it crowned on us. And I fled. And I fled fast as I could go. Here, James 4:7 tells us, with this sandwich text, I like the way he put that, if we draw near to God, if we resist the devil, he's going to mosey off. He's going to flee. Why is he going to flee? Because there's a better power, a stronger power, a more powerful protection there, isn't there? Then there's another statement found in this in that quarterly again. Volume 3 of the Testimonies to Churches, page 456 and 7 says, Satan frequently appears as an angel of light, arrayed in the livery of heaven. He assumes friendly airs, manifesting great sanctity of character and high regard for his victims, the souls whom he means to deceive and destroy. Perils lie in the path which he invites souls to travel, but he succeeds in concealing these and presents the attractions only. He doesn't show the snares, just the attractions. When we pastored the Salmon Church years ago, had a couple of church members that were trappers. And I would go with them a time or two just to see how they did it. It's amazing the details that they would do to make a trap, and how that they would kind of camouflage it, hide things, put things in the way so that the animal had to not go this way, it had to go the right way. And that I couldn't help but think of that when I saw it. He succeeds in concealing and presents the attractions only. And then it goes on. The great captain of our salvation has conquered in our behalf, that through him we might conquer, if we would, in our own behalf. Oh, Christ saves none against his choice. He compels none to obedience. He made the infinite sacrifice that they might overcome in his name, and his righteousness be imputed unto them. End of quote. Volume 3, Testimonies 456 and 7. So this week, the quarterlies asked us to study Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 to 20. which includes the armor of God. And since next week's going to deal with the items, we're going to deal with more around it. I want to spend a little time today on the memory verse. So what's the memory verse say? Let's read it in different translations here. What we have, Ephesians 6, 10, and 11. Somebody have it from the quarterly? Nobody has a quarterly?
Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil.
Against the what of the devil?
Schemes.
Schemes, it says. Okay, somebody have a different translation than that. Strategy? Wiles, King James. Okay. So the question I would like to ask is, why do we need to have the armor of God according to this verse, these verses? What does it tell us in verse 11? Why do we need the armor of God? Against what? Against this. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to do a little bit of word study here to help us a little bit more, I think. At least I found it very interesting. We need a complete defense. We don't just go out with a helmet or just a sword. We need the complete armor of God, and that's going to be dealt with next week, so I'm not going to deal with that too much today. But in order to be able to stand, the words may be able comes from only one Greek word, and that is in a verb that's present tense, and it means to have the ability to, or to have the power to, or to have the strength to. Now, that's the meaning of those three words. Go ahead. You have something? Oh, no, I say, okay. I just saw your hand up. Be careful. I'm like an auctioneer, you know. Okay. To be able to stand, to have the power to have the strength to stand. I'm sure most of all of us here, one time or another in our life when we were a lot younger, played sports of some kind. And when you did, there were some times when you had to put on the extra burst of energy, right? When I was in college, back in those days, we didn't compete with other, we just had intramurals, you know, and so forth. And I happened to be on a football team, Joe Galusha. How many remember Professor Joe Galusha when you were there? Remember, yeah? And so he was my captain. He was the quarterback. And we were playing a team that was really good, but we were playing for the championship, and we had a few injuries. Now, we didn't play tackle, so we still, you didn't get beat up, you know, it was just flag football. But it was getting towards the end of the game, and we were all pretty tired, and yet we had to get that last exertion. And every time I read this text, I think of that one thing, because I was a right guard. And the guy that came running at me was a lot bigger than me, but I had to stand. I had to stand there if I was going to protect my quarterback, right? To stand, be able to stand, you have to have strength, determination, and a reason to do it. I think that's the most important. What is the reason that we want to be able to stand? Can you give me a good reason to want to stand against the devil?
He wants to destroy us.
You don't want to be destroyed?
I know it's strange.
Yeah. Well, that's a good reason, isn't it, to stand? You don't want to be destroyed.
Or your children, or your grandchildren, or...
Oh, so you want to stand to protect others too? Yeah. Okay. Anybody else have another? Yeah, you want to, in a sense, you're actually representing God, aren't you, when you resist the devil? Okay, now the words to stand also comes from only one Greek word. And what's so interesting about this is that it's in the aorist tense. Now, I know that doesn't make much sense unless you know what aorist tense means. Aorist tense means that it's not limited to a timetable. It can be past, present, or future. It doesn't make any difference when that text is applied or that word is applied. So when you say, I love you, if you do it in the aorist tense, I loved you, I am loving you, and I will love you. You see? And that's what this says, to stand. To stand. And what does it mean? Here's a few of the meanings. To make, to stand. To set. To put in place. To set forth. To appoint. To endure. To stand fast. Be firm. A lot of meanings. But they all basically say the same thing. God will make us able to stand like he did in the past, like he is doing now, and he will make it so that we can do it in the future. Yes, we need the defense of God to be able to stand, to endure, to be firm, to stand fast against the wiles, the strategies of the devil at all times. We needed it in the past, we need it in the future, and we need it today. So let's look now at that word wiles. Notice it's plural. In other words, he's got more than one plan. He's got more than one strategy. He has more than one way of doing it. Trick and fraud is another definition given by the Webster's Dictionary of this. When you think of a trick, what do you usually think of? Is it something supernatural? Not necessarily, is it? I should have brought my string. Showed you a trick. I have a string that I tie in a circle, and I put it on somebody's finger, and then twist and put my finger on that finger, and I take it off. It's a trick. Nothing supernatural. And I think sometimes the devil uses the best tricks that are not supernatural. Tricks that are just normal occurrences. So we can say that this verse is telling us that we must need the complete suit of defense against the devil. The complete suit of defense of God against the devil in order to continually be able to stand against the tricks and strategies of the devil. Paul puts it kind of this way in verse 12, Ephesians 6:12. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual darkness or wickedness in high places. 6:12. Now, we've all memorized that, probably had it for a memory verse when we were little kids, right? And I hope we've all studied it a time or two, but you know, it's interesting to me, some things in there that just keep popping out at me. I think it's interesting that we wrestle not. Now, in that word wrestle, what picture do you have in your mind when you think of wrestling? Fighting. Is it active? Yes. You're not doing it just, but it's not a verb in this verse. It's not a verb. It's a noun. So now what does it mean? A noun is something, a name of what? Person, yeah. Or a condition. A state of being. Here, we get in the picture, I get in the picture that Paul is telling us that we're in the state of a conflict. We're in the midst of a struggle. Yes, we are in midst actively fighting, but if it's a noun, it's more than just the actual fight. It's the condition that you are in. Do we feel like we have quite a struggle in this world? Just this morning, listen about Christian there in the hospital. Can't get to Spokane because Spokane's full. Rhonda's brother's been in the hospital of the Holy Family for over 6 weeks because they don't have a place they can put him. The nursing homes are all full. Planes, he's third on the list. Can't go anywhere. He's still in the hospital, waiting someplace to go. Like Dr. Hansen said when we were talking to him about trying to find a place for Steve, we're just overloaded. The whole health issue. We're in a struggle. Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, wrestling requires endurance, as in he that endureth till the end.
Yeah, right. Kind of like that standing, huh? Takes some endurance to do that. It's interesting, too, also that this word wrestle right here it's the only time this Greek word is used. It's the only place in the Bible. Therefore, I think that Paul is telling us that we are in this condition, this situation. We are a place where we need to endure, huh? And then the word flesh. We wrestle not against flesh and blood. So what's he talking about there? Say what? Humanity. Exactly right. That Greek word means human body or human nature or human frame. That's what the word flesh means. Yeah. Therefore, we see that this struggle is not just against our weaknesses as humans. It's not just getting old and getting tired. My wife and I are still amazed at how tired we can get in just a half a day. And my son's no help at all. He keeps reminding me that I'm turning antique. That's my third son, not the oldest son, yeah. That's what I tell him. That's what I said. I tell him that makes me worth more then. So, and the word principalities, now that comes from an interesting word. The Greek meaning of that word means it's a beginning, an extremity, or an attached cord, or a high estate. Therefore, this could be referring to the beginning of evil, the high estate of someone who originated evil or sin. In other words, it's talking about who? Satan, the devil himself. The devil himself. We are continually in a struggle against the trickery and strategies of the devil himself. Come on in, it's okay. My granddaughter can come back to church, can't she? Welcome home. She's been to the Philippines for quite a little while, so we're glad to see her back too. She was a great help. She came and helped Grandma weed the garden this week for a while. I like what Mrs. White put in manuscript, page 89. Sanctification is not the work of a moment, an hour, or a day. It is a continual growth in grace. Now, we've always heard the other statement, where it's the work of a lifetime. But I like this one even too. Sanctification is not the work of a moment, an hour, or a day. It is a continual growth in grace. Satan lives and is active, and every day we need to cry earnestly to God for help and strength to resist him. As long as Satan reigns, we shall have, okay, listen now, we shall have self to subdue, besetments to overcome, and there is no stopping place. There is no point to which we can come and say, we have fully attained. Now that's encouraging or discouraging? Which way would you look at that? Humbling. That's a good way of putting it. Perfect. Going on. The Christian life is constantly an onward march. Jesus sits as a refiner and purifier of his people. And when his image is perfectly reflected in them, they are perfect and holy and prepared for translation. End of quote. Well, you can interpret it the way you want there. Now, here, let me put it this way. I believe that 1 John 1:9 is the way that you are perfect. As we learn about our sins, we confess them to Jesus. He forgives us our sins, and we're forgiven and cleansed from all unrighteousness. Now, if you're cleansed from all unrighteousness, is that perfection? But then you make a mistake. Then you need to go back to 1 John 1:9. So perfection is a growth. I'm just making my way of putting it simple.
So that's almost like it is a continual process because of the fact that we continue to sin, didn't he?
Let's put it this way. We continually grow in understanding what sin is, because the closer we come to Christ, the more we see in our lives what? Our sin or a deficiency of character. Go ahead, Dawn. And I think that would tie with what Mel said. It's because we love God. We want to bring glory. Whether you eat or drink or whatever you do what? All to the glory of God. Yeah, it's good. It's great. Then there's this word powers. Now, I know I'm moving on here because I want to get to the climax really bad. Powers. This is an interesting word. It has the following meanings according to the lexicon. It is possible. It is permitted. It is lawful. So this powers that we're wrestling against is possible, it's been permitted, and it's lawful. The word has been translated 29 times in the King James Version as authority. Here is one of those places where it helps us understand what kind of power we're talking about or what kind of authority is involved in that's lawful. Luke chapter 4 and verse 6. Now we know Matthew has the time when Jesus was tempted by the devil, and we usually almost always go to Matthew, but let's go to Luke's record. Luke chapter 4. Same situation, Jesus in the wilderness being tempted by the devil. And in verse 6, what does it say? Luke 4, verse 6.
And the devil said to him, all this authority I will give you, and their glory, for this has been delivered to me, and I gave it to whomever I wish.
Now, who's talking?
The devil.
The devil is. And what did he claim to have? Authority, or that power, that same word. It's exactly the same Greek word. He claimed to have that authority, and according to the definition, it was authority that was permitted him. So when was he permitted to have that authority? At the fall of man. He had that authority. So what he was telling Jesus here was really not a real lie, in a real sense, in that he did have authority given to him. He was trying to deceive Jesus into saying, I can give you this authority. But we have something better, because Jesus says in Matthew chapter 9 and verse 6, Jesus said, but that ye may know that the Son of Man hath the power or authority on earth to forgive sins, then saith he to the sick of the palsy, arise, take up thy bed, and go into thy house. Jesus had greater authority, stronger authority. The devil had no authority to forgive sins, but Jesus does. And then again, in Matthew 28:18, Jesus came and spake unto them, saying, all power, same Greek word, all power, all authority is given unto me in heaven and in earth. So the devil had some authority, but not equal to the authority or the power that Jesus has. So we still wrestle against the power that was, or authority that was permitted Satan for a while. We're going to look at that a little bit later. Yes, the devil's been given this, but Jesus has greater power, greater authority. And Jesus has promised that we can have part of it. In 1 Peter tells us that we can become partakers of the divine nature through the great precious promises. So we come now to the word rulers. Notice it's plural. What rulers are in darkness, rulers of darkness? Who would you identify as the rulers of darkness? The evil angels, along with the one that we already identified as being the principality or the devil himself. We don't know how many angels the devil brought. How many angels are there? The Bible tells us it's thousands times thousands and 10,000s times 10,000s, or unnumbered. We don't know how many. But it's big enough and strong enough that it's got the majority of the world under its power, their powers, right? So yes, rulers. The definition of the word ruler is monarch of the world, or a worldly prince, or a power that's paramount in the world. So we go to this darkness. The Greek word for darkness means darkness, gloom of punishment, misery, moral darkness. So this is, again, identifying the devil and his angels as the princes of darkness, the paramount powers of moral darkness, the monarchs of misery and gloom. Would that make a pretty good description of the devil and his helpers? I think it does. Then let's go to the last part. This is what was new to me when I first discovered it some years ago. Ephesians 6:12, rulers of darkness of this world. Okay, what do you see as the interpretation of the world? Well, it's interesting. This word world is not the Greek word cosmos, which is the one that's translated like the earth that we're on. This Greek word is aion, ion. Excuse me. And what this word means, it's a period of time of significant character. That's the meaning of that word. Very important in a lot of the other things, because that particular word has been very loosely translated eternal, everlasting, forever. For instance, you hear people tell, well, there's an everlasting fire. That's the Greek word. It's a fire that doesn't have a timetable attached to it, or it's a time of significant character. So let's plug that in. We are supposed to be wrestling against wickedness, or in high places. In this world, I'm going to paraphrase it. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, the human body, but against the originator of evil, principalities, against powers, the authorities, against the rulers, that which is paramount, of the darkness of this world, and of the darkness of this specific, significant time. So what significant time did the devil have authority? From the fall till when? Crucifixion. A significant period of time. After that, we've already read, at the very beginning, remember, that Satan knows that he's pretty well beat. Much better than we do. We still think that he's quite a conquering foe. But he's been conquered and beaten. His authority's been taken away. He's been impeached, if you please, as the prince of the world. And yet he's still out here making battles and winning wars. Somebody, no, okay. My wife says I'm getting hard of hearing, so if I hear any noise, I might, I ask her, she says, I think you're getting hard of hearing. I say, what? So now I want to look at this one. All these things, it says we're going to face spiritual wickedness in high places. Again, when I do this, I'm not trying, and I hope we don't see it as trying to see different meanings of things, but rather broaden out some of the concepts that we might have. The word spiritual is an adjective. What's that mean? Well, it identifies the kind of wickedness that the verse is talking about. This is the only way this Greek word is translated in the King James Version. It's the only place. All the other times it is translated heavenly. Now, excuse me, I'm ahead of myself. All the other places it's translated evil spirits. So let's look at some of this. How are we supposed to test the evil spirits? Can you remember a verse in the Bible? How we're supposed to test the evil spirits? Let's go to 1 John chapter 4 and verse 1. 1 John chapter 4 and verse 1. And this tells us when we think that there's some evil spirits involved in some high places, what are we to do to test them? How do we know if they're evil or not? 1 John 4, 1. Who has that one?
Beloved, believe not every spirit, but try the spirits whether they are of God, because many false prophets are gone out into the world.
Okay, false prophets, evil spirits, that kind of sounds familiar, wouldn't it? So how are we to test them? Let's go to Isaiah 8:20. What does that one tell us? All right. And what are some of the things that the evil spirits will use to deceive us? 2 Thessalonians 2:9. 2 Thessalonians 2:9. What things does the devil and his helpers do to try to deceive us? What do they use? 2 Thessalonians 2:9. Boy, signs and lying wonders. So what law, go ahead, Andrew.
We always say, consider what people say, see if it aligns with the Bible, but we have to add something to that. When the devil comes and impersonates Christ, at first he will say things from the Bible, so it requires endurance and listening to what they say, because at some point he veers off. Mm-hmm. But the first words will be from the Bible.
The Bible is the most, in fact, I don't know of any church in our community here that doesn't believe that the Bible is something they live by, and yet we have all these different things and opinions. Even with now in our own Seventh-day Adventist denomination, we're having some real issues about theology, huh? So what law is it that I'll go there. What law is it that we're supposed to judge the others by, or ourselves even? God's law, John 15, verse 10. It's called my Father's commandments, right? And then James chapter 2, verses 10 to 12. What does it tell us there? For whosoever shall keep the whole law and yet offend in one point, he is guilty of all. For he that said, do not commit adultery, said also, do not kill. What law are we talking about here? 10 Commandment law. Now, if thou commit no adultery, but if thou kill, thou art become a transgressor of the law. So speak ye and so do as they that shall be judged by the law of what? Liberty. I like that definition of the law. Those that's been here for a while and heard me before know that I believe that when Mrs. White talks about the Ten Commandments as a transcript of God's character, that we can go and look in the Ten Commandments and we can actually see God's character exemplified there. And that's why David could say, oh, I love thy law. Why? Because it described his God. Thou art worthy, he is holy, and so forth. Today in my sermon you'll get some more of that, but God is defined in the law of liberty. Liberty. So if we're driving out here and the speed limit is 70, which when people come here, they don't realize that we can drive 70 out here. We have some friends of ours that were following us from Clark Fork one Sabbath to come eat. And I was driving 70. He kept falling back, so I'd slow down. He'd catch you up. And then I'd slow back. And God me said, man, you drive so fast. Don't you know? You break the law like that. And well, our speed limit's 70. Just because you're from Idaho, it's 55, you know. Yeah. But if you're driving the speed limit, you're at liberty, right? But if you're driving 85, well, you're still doing it, but how how much at liberty are you? How do you, go ahead, you have some more, Andrew.
Many TV evangelists refer to the Ten Commandments as bondage, which is not equal to liberty. There's a little disconnect.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point.
Well, when you're speeding down the road and you know you're speeding, then you're constantly looking out for a cop because that's what's going to get you in trouble.
Yeah, you don't want to get caught.
Free
No.
because you're always looking for who's going to get me.
Yeah.
Who's going to catch me.
And sometimes you even have to turn on the air conditioner because you get really hot. Right. Good.
Well, I think it'd be good to differentiate between the letter of the law and the spirit of the law because while, yes, the law is a transcript of God's character, if you just take it as a set of do's and don'ts, it doesn't work perfectly. Some of the most unlovable and unloving and obnoxious people in the world I know are ones who just keep the letter of the law. They keep all the 10 Commandments.
Mm-hmm.
But I would not want to see them in heaven, honestly, because they're not fun to live with at all.
Well,
So, it's again the spirit. Is it really the character of God, or is it just the do and the don't?
yeah. I think a good illustration of what she just said here is Nebuchadnezzar. Yeah, but the Nebuchadnezzar is one I like because it moves from the letter to the spirit. When Daniel interpreted the image, what did Nebuchadnezzar do? He fell down and worshipped who? Daniel. He fell down and worshipped Daniel. His God is the real God. And because of that, we're going to worship his God. And then he got to where he understood that, and then we come to the three Hebrews in the fiery furnace. And then when they walked out of that furnace, were delivered by God, what did Nebuchadnezzar do then? Made a decree to do what? Yeah, now we're talking about the letter of the law. Now we're talking about you got to do this or you're going to die, and if you don't do this, I'll put you to death. But then he come out of pasturing for 7 years, chewing on grass. And what did he say then? I extol the living God. I extol the living God. And I think Donovan would back this up if he was here, and I'm sure Jim has seen the same thing too. If you lead somebody into understanding a little bit about Jesus, a lot of times they think you're a pretty perfect person. They'll even come to the place where they're really shocked if you do anything wrong, you know. Ron would remember this one year when I pastored the Idaho Salmon Church there. I had a baptismal class downstairs in the basement. And the Sabbath lesson that day was how the mind affects the body. And I can still remember this very clearly. So I had Darrell Knopf, one of my church members, an elder of the church, was going to work with me on that. So I was telling the people, we got in their class and had our opening prayer, and I said, everybody take your pulse. Find your pulse and see what your pulse is. And so we did, and we compared pulses and stuff. And then we started, and pretty soon Darrell walks in with his magazine. Hey, is this your magazine? Darrell, I'm trying to teach you a lesson. Please sit down. I'm just, is this your, Darrell, I'm trying to teach you a lesson. And we got into quite a little argument, right? Then I said, okay, everybody, take your pulse. Boom, 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 boom. All except for one little lady that I was giving Bible studies to, and she went into shock, basically. Hers went down. I just couldn't believe Pastor Denny would do such a thing. Sometimes people worship the people that are leading them to Christ. But then they get to where they learn about the do's and the don'ts, the rights and the wrongs. And then they want other people to do the do's and the don'ts and the rights and the wrongs for the wrong reasons. And that's going into the letter of the law. But when they come to, I love thy law. I want to do what Jesus wants me to do. I want to glorify him in whether I'm eating, drinking, or whatever I'm doing. I want to represent Jesus as the light of the world. Now you're in the spirit of the law, for it's the law of liberty. I've got enough time. I want to get this in. This, to me, was absolutely an eye-opener. Talks about wickedness where? Where does it say the wickedness is? Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12. What's it say? High places. Okay, anybody have a different translation? Does it say anything different than any other translation? Heavenly places, good. Because the word high is translated heavenly 16 times in the King James. The word places is not in the original language. It's not in the original manuscript. It's not there. It's been supplied to make it sound right for this English people, for those that's reading it. So it's talking about wickedness, heavenly wickedness. What? Where would that be? Just to show you how that word is translated in different ways, let's go to John chapter 3, verse 12. John chapter 3, verse 12, Jesus speaking. If I have told you earthly things and you believe not, how shall you believe if I tell you of heavenly things? That's that same word called high in Ephesians. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15:48, as in the earthy, such are they also that are earthy. And as in the heavenly, there's that word, such are they also that are heavenly. Hebrews 6:4. For it is impossible for those who were once enlightened and have tasted of heavenly gift and were made partakers of the Holy Ghost. Ellen White helps us out with this comment in Great Controversy 6:15 and 16. As the Sabbath has become the special point of controversy throughout Christendom, and religious and secular authorities have combined to enforce the observance of the Sunday, the persistent refusal of a small minority to yield to the popular demand will make them objects of universal aggression. It will be urged that the few who stand in opposition to an institution of the church and a law of the state ought not to be tolerated, that it is better for them to suffer than for the whole nations to be thrown into confusion and lawlessness. This argument will appear conclusive, and a decree, listen now, a decree will finally be issued against those who hallow the Sabbath of the fourth commandment, denouncing them as deserving of the severest punishment and giving the people liberty after a certain time to put them to death. Romanism in the old world, apostate Protestantism in the new, will pursue a similar course toward those who honor all the divine precepts. And to quote Great Controversy 6:15, 16. Romanism in the old world, what church is that? The Catholic Church. Protestantism in the new world, what's that? Where's the new world? United States of America. Protestants, people today don't even know what a Protestant is. I've asked several people if they were Protestant. I'm not protesting anything. It's true. It's true. But we as the commandment-keeping people are continually fighting or having to defend ourselves, if you please, against false teachings of the churches that claim to be followers of Jesus Christ. We are in a condition of a wrestling match, fighting, if you please, until Jesus comes. The condition of being afflicted by evil spirits in spiritually high esteemed places would, would be the condition that we find us in, and the apostate fallen churches all around us in, struggling against the strategies of the devil. I'm going to go back and read now the Ephesians 6:12 with plugging in these meanings that we've looked at today. For we are in the state of wrestling, not against the human body, but against the originator of evil, against the powers or authorities, against the rulers that are paramount of the darkness of this world, who are there for a significant period of time, against spiritual wickedness in high places, or the spiritual high esteem of apostate churches. So I would understand this verse to say that we are in a condition or a state of continual struggle against the trickery of the devil, who is the origin of trickery. And we are needing the complete defense of the armor of God to be able to stand against the evil trickery that we face every day in this particular significant period of time in which we live. I asked Rhonda if she would read Friday's lesson. It's in your quarterly. The first paragraph, the first half of the quarterly. And then I'd like to just a little discussion of it. So, I'm sorry. You got it? Okay.
Our hope is an aggressive one, and as faithful soldiers of Jesus, we must bear the bloodstained banner into the very strongholds of the enemy. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. If we will consent to lay down our arms, to lower the bloodstained banner, to become the captives and servants of Satan, we may be released from the conflict and the suffering. But this peace will only be gained at the loss of Christ and heaven. We cannot accept peace on such conditions. Let it be war to the end of earth's history, rather than peace through apostasy and sin.
And that kind of goes on with what Andrew was bringing out a little about endurance, wasn't it? Enduring. We can't expect to have an easy life when the devil is still alive. But we can have peace. We can have peace. Isaiah 26, verse 3. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, complete peace, whose mind is stayed upon thee, because he trusteth in thee. I think I'd like to close this lesson with Paul's prayer found in Ephesians 6, verses 18 to 20. This prayer, I think, is very applicable for what we just discussed today. If you want to follow along, it's Ephesians 6, 18 to 20. I'm reading from the King James. Praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, and watching thereunto with all perseverance and supplication for all saints, and for me, the utterance may be given unto me, that I may open my mouth boldly to make known the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in bonds, that therein I may speak boldly as ought to speak. I pray that this was our prayer as well. May we be continually praying for one another, that we will be filled with the Holy Spirit, that we will be able to speak freely and openly with confidence, the revealing good news of salvation, wherein we may be found. So, Mel, would you close with prayer, please?
Our Heavenly Father, we just want to thank you so much for this opportunity to delve into your word, Ephesians and other parts of the Bible. I pray that each one of us have perhaps seen things a little bit different, broader light, that we can be drawn closer to you. We just thank you for Denny's leading now, and just bless us each as we continue our study time and in our walk with you this Sabbath day is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, each one.